Hello, this video is going to be about Newbery Medal list books that I like. I've read quite a few of the books because I have read them out loud to my children, and then I got into a time where I wanted to read all the Newbery books, both the honor books and the Newbery Medal winners. So I have read a lot of books from that list. And I will put on the screen the book cover, and I'll also put on the year that book won the award or was a Newbery Honor book. And I am starting this with some nonfiction Newbery list books. The first one that I really liked is, oh, I should say these are not in any particular order. I'm not saying this is the most, precious or dearly loved book on my list. It's just one of 17. And because there are 17 books on this list, I'm going to go very quickly and say very little about the books. I'm just going to tell you the ones that I think are really worth reading. And believe me, a lot of books got left off this particular list because I read a lot of Newbery books that I would not recommend to anyone, but these I would recommend. So very quickly now, hopefully very quickly, the first one on the list is Claudette Colvin, Twice Toward Justice. I am reading off a paper. This book is by Phillip Hoose. It is about Claudette Colvin. It's a true story. This young woman lived in Montgomery, Alabama, and she actually did the same thing as Rosa Parks at an earlier time. For that, she was arrested, and she did not receive any great notoriety from the Black community, or let's just say she didn't receive any great appreciation. She does have notoriety. Obviously, she's got a book now. So this biography of Claudette Colvin is very good. And she was also part of the Browder versus Gale lawsuit that ended segregation on buses. So, wonderful young woman. And so the next book that I recommend is The Great Fire by Jim Murphy. I did not read this book to my children. It is kind of heartrending because people actually get killed in that fire, including children. It is about a fire that happened in Chicago. Certainly cannot remember the year, and I forgot to write it down, so I'll have to put it here on the screen by magic. There it is. Okay. The third book that is nonfiction that I recommend is The Wright Brothers, How They Invented the Airplane by Russell Freedman. Wonderful book, full of pictures. I read this one out loud to my son when he was about 9 years old. He loved it. I loved it. Tells a lot about the Wright brothers, how they got started and what they did. Okay, now we are headed towards fiction. The first one I recommend is Holes by Louis Sachar. Sachar? Anyhow, yeah, we know that book, Holes. So, Stanley was in a boys' detention center. He was forced to dig holes, and he thinks the warden is looking for something. So, I loved that book because of the layers. It has like 3 different storylines, and they're layered together, and you don't really know how they layer together until the end of the book. I thought that was genius. The next one I recommend is Hatchet by Gary Paulsen, a wonderful book about a boy surviving in the wilderness after a plane crash. And now we come to one of my favorite books ever. It is Sarah, Plain and Tall by Patricia MacLachlan. And this book is so heart-touching. I love this book. It was actually written for younger children. It's more of a middle grade novel rather than YA. Definitely recommend it, even if you've already seen the movie, please think about reading this wonderful book. It doesn't take long. It's a short book, but really worth the time spent reading. Next one is The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. I loved this book. It is a mystery. The man, Samuel Westing, died and left a will, and he invites like everybody from his family to come to the reading of the will, or I guess his lawyer invites them. Anyhow, they're all there at the mansion listening to the reading of the will, and they find out that he's leaving his fortune to a stranger, and the stranger could possibly even be a murderer, and there's a mystery, and it's just an exciting, unusual book that is a lot of fun to read. The next one is The Slave Dancer by Paula Fox. And this is a sad story. The boy is 13. He is kidnapped in New Orleans, and he is forced to work on a ship where his job is to play the flute so that when the slaves that are on this ship are being exercised on the deck, they will dance. I know, kind of pathetic, but it is a very good book and I recommend it. The next one is My Brother Sam is Dead by James Lincoln Collier and Christopher Collier. I think this is one of the best anti-war novels I've ever read. Sam's the older brother. He's fighting for the Revolutionary War, and his father is in favor of the British Army. So there's a lot of conflict going on in this young man's life, and I guess his name is Tim. The younger brother is Tim. So Tim has to decide whose side he's on. Extremely sad story, but definitely a good anti-war novel for children. I would say for teenagers, not for younger children. The next one is The Perilous Guard by Elizabeth Marie Pope, and I have read both of her books. She has another book called Sherwood Ring, The Sherwood Ring, and I did not like that book nearly as much as I liked The Perilous Guard, and I thought some of the descriptions were incredibly beautiful. The next book on my list is Sounder by William H. Armstrong. Sounder is about a sharecropping family. The young boy and his family, they're very poor. The book is about the dog. The dog is named Sounder. However, it's more about the boy's adjustment after his father is arrested. Wonderful book. The next one I recommend is I, Juan de Pareja by Elizabeth Borton de Trevino. It is about the slave of an artist in the 1600s. Juan de Pareja is the slave of Diego Velázquez. This is a true story. Definitely recommended. I've read this book twice, and it's very rare that I read a book twice. And this is a true story. Did I just say that? Okay, move on. The next one I recommend is also a true story. It's a memoir, Raskin, Memoir of a Better Era by Sterling North. Love this book. It is about a boy and his raccoon. The next one is not a true story. Oh, wait, maybe it is. It's based on a true story. Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell. I love that book. If you haven't read that book, why not? I know a lot of schools these days ask the children to read this book, And my daughter read it under those circumstances and didn't particularly like it, but I think it's just wonderful. I've read that book twice too. Once when I was a child, and once a few years ago when I read it out loud to my homeschooling children. And I would say that is one of the best books I've ever read about women being strong and being independent. Of course, she was forced to be independent because she was on the island alone, but she's a very good example. And I just love that book and the woman whose life it was based on. The next one is Moccasin Trail by Eloise Jarvis McGraw. I really don't remember much about this book. I remember there was a lot of traveling on horseback over the mountains, not far from where I now live in the Idaho area. Anyhow, definitely a recommended book. I just remember it's a good book. The next one I recommend is The 21 Balloons by William Pena de Bois. Anyhow, this is an interesting novel. It takes place probably about 150 years ago, starts in San Francisco, and an eccentric man decides he's going to take off in a balloon and go across the ocean, which indeed he does. It's really a fun book. I recommend this one. And the last one on my list is The Cat That Went to Heaven by Elizabeth Coatsworth. So it's a short book, but definitely worth the read. So that's it. That's my entire list. Remember that these are books that I believe adults would enjoy because I read them as an adult and enjoyed them. So I hope you can find some titles on there that would interest you. And that's all for now. Thank you very much for listening. Bye.